Testing, testing.
Do you want us to test up here too?
Yes, please. I think they've checked it on. Well, welcome everybody to the debate for the Republican candidates for the primary for Attorney General of the state of Kansas, of the great state of Kansas. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the sponsoring organizations, the 2nd District Republican Party. I'm Cheryl Reynolds, I'm the chair. I'm going to be assisted tonight by Tim Tyson, who's the secretary of the 2nd District, and Richard Todd, who's the treasurer of the 2nd District. And then I also want to give a chance to, we were also sponsored by Crawford County Republicans and Pittsburg State University Republicans. And John, do you want to say just a word?
Thank you very much for attending tonight. I'm John Minton, chairman of the county party. Thank you for coming. We got a couple elected officials I'd like to recognize. We've got Ken Collins from the 2nd District and Richard Hildebrand, our state senator, right here. So thank you guys for coming tonight. Hope we have a nice spirited debate. We keep it somewhat friendly and not like the stuff we see on TV. So hopefully it'll be a nice night. So thank you everybody for coming.
Okay. Just a couple of housekeeping rules. We are live streaming. So I want you to listen respectfully to all the candidates and respond appropriately so that we look well in the press. So thank you. Okay, we'll start with, I should tell you, the candidates drew for position and drew for speaking order and podium selection. And in true chivalrous fashion, they all let Kelly draw the first number, so we're going to start with opening statements, which will be 2 minutes long, and we'll start with Kelly Warren.
Before we get started, Cheryl, I already see the timer says 30 seconds left, so okay.
I think he was messing with us.
Right.
We'll get better as we go.
It's all good. Well, thank you, everyone. I am Kelly Warren, a lifelong Kansan. I want to thank the 2nd District Republican Party and Cheryl, Tim, and Richard in their positions, and the Crawford County Republican Party, as well as the Pittsburg State Republicans as well, for hosting us here tonight. I am honored to represent the state of Kansas from Senate District 11, and I am running to be our Attorney General. And as chief legal advocate for our state as Attorney General, it's important that we have a fighter who wins. We have to have a conservative Republican like me who wins tough elections in Johnson County, which is about as purple as my dress politically, and then wins on conservative policies once elected and has a record of more than 25 years of success in the courtroom. Because you know why? I think we can all agree that Biden and the left, their policies are not good for Kansas, right? Whether it's inflation, whether it's gas prices, whether it's the border, whether it's wokeness, whether it's critical race theory, it's all very difficult for Kansans and not our American conservative values. So I have been standing up and fighting against the left since I first ran for the House in 2018. I was asked to run by the grassroots, like many of you here in this room, because we had a woke Republican who claimed to represent me and my conservative values, and she did not. So defeated that incumbent in my own party, then defeated the Democrat, became a conservative voice in the House. People wanted me to be a bigger voice. I could do that in the Senate. I defeated the one Republican senator who voted no and value them both. So as Attorney General, you can bet I will continue to fight for and win on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what this job requires, is a fighter who wins on those issues and has experience winning at the ballot box, because we cannot afford to let this office fall to the Democrat. The Democrat would only be a Biden ally, and we cannot let that happen. Thank you.
Our next opening statement will be from Tony Mativi. Give us just a second to work with the technology here.
No worries. I also want to thank the party for having us here. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for everybody to get to hear from all three of us side by side, which should be very educational for everyone. This race presents a very sharp contrast. It's a contrast between two career politicians and one career prosecutor. The Kansas Attorney General is the chief law enforcement official of the state. It's not the chief legal officer, it's the chief law enforcement official of the state. The Attorney General's office has 12 divisions. I've worked there. I'm the only candidate in the race who's worked in the office. The Attorney General's office has 12 divisions. Every one of them touches in one way or another, directly or indirectly, investigation or prosecution or both. The Kansas Attorney General's office oversees the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. That's why the Attorney General is the chief law enforcement official of the state. If you're okay with the idea of your chief law enforcement official being a politician, there are two wonderful and capable, qualified politicians in this room for you to choose from. But if you insist that your chief law enforcement official actually be a law enforcement official, I am the only candidate in the race with those qualifications. I prosecuted in the DA's office, the AG's office, and the United States Attorney's office. Everything from speeding tickets to murder cases, drug trafficking to kidnapping to bank robbery to domestic and international terrorism to espionage and Chinese spies. I have 30 years of experience as a prosecutor. This race presents a sharp contrast. There is one candidate in the race who brings to the job the qualifications to keep Kansas safe, and I am that candidate.
Thank you. And then our final opening statement by Chris Kobach.
Most Kansas Republicans know me as the two-term Secretary of State who brought in Kansas's election security laws, making our elections the most secure in the country. And many Kansas Republicans also know that President Trump chose me to lead his commission, Presidential Commission on Election Fraud. But what you may not know about me is that I was a professor of constitutional law for 15 years at UMKC. And you may also not know that for the past 20 years, I have been litigating against the ACLU in federal courts all across this country, in the 3rd Circuit, 5th Circuit, 7th, 8th, 9th, and DC circuits. And that experience is particularly important. But something changed for me on January 20th, 2020. Biden took office, and in his first week in office, he issued not one, but over a dozen executive orders that violate the United States Constitution or federal statute. And I realized that the only official who can stop him is not a member of Congress. It's a state attorney general who has the jurisdiction to bring a challenge in federal court. And at that tipping point, I realized that we need an attorney general who will stand side by side with Texas, because right now Texas is the only state that is carrying the rest of the country on its shoulders bringing these suits. When I'm attorney general, Kansas will stand shoulder to shoulder with Texas, taking Joe Biden to court. And we will win. And I'll wake up every morning having my breakfast thinking about what our next lawsuit against Joe Biden is going to be. And I'll say this too, I'm the only attorney standing up here on the stage, in fact, I'm the only attorney in Kansas who has sued a sitting Democrat president not once, but 4 times. I sued President Obama on behalf of 10 ICE agents in 2012 over the DACA amnesty. In 2021, I sued President Biden in the first lawsuit that I brought, second lawsuit that I brought, and that was against the OSHA mandate, the vaccine mandate. I represented a group of North Dakota employers and employees who did not want to be forced by the federal government to take the vaccine. And our case was combined with others, and we won in the Supreme Court. You may have also heard a case that I brought in March. I'm representing 36 members of the Air Force who are suing to assert their religious freedom to say no to the vaccine while Biden is trying to kick them out of the Air Force. You need an attorney with the right kind of experience, and that is the kind of experience that counts.
Thank you. Okay, so for the first question, the order will be Tony, Chris, and then Kelly. And the first question is, a lot is said about the problem of government overreach. Be specific. Where do you see the overreach, and what would you do to curb it?
The overreach is unprecedented, I believe, in the history of our country. We've seen our current Attorney General sue very successfully against this administration, whether it's mask mandates or vaccine mandates. We have seen that attorneys general can be the best line of defense against federal overreach. Specifically, there's a number of items out there that I think should be important to us. I am a landlord. Many landlords are small business owners. When the President of the United States stands up and imposes an eviction moratorium and tells landlords you cannot kick out a deadbeat tenant, even if you rely on that income to feed your family, and then admits in the very same breath that he doesn't have the legal authority to do that, that's an area where our Attorney General can step up and protect Kansans from that kind of federal overreach. Whether it's them coming after our property rights, whether them coming after our guns and trying to limit our Second Amendment rights, them trying to limit our right to free speech. Let me tell you something. I have prosecuted some of the most dangerous domestic terrorists this state has ever seen. I prosecuted 3 guys in southwest Kansas that wanted to turn Garden City into Oklahoma City. I know what domestic terrorists look like. They do not look like mothers at school board meetings. That's where we need to be able to push back against this administration, and I'm prepared to do that. I will be the person standing at the podium making those arguments myself against this administration.
Thank you. And Chris, 90 seconds.
I'll agree that the primary source of overreach comes from the Biden administration right now. It's truly unbelievable. As I said, I sued President Obama on behalf of ICE agents. I thought he was pretty bad. Biden makes the Obama administration look like child's play. Or maybe I should say the people pulling Biden's strings and writing what's on the teleprompter make Obama look like child's play. Let me give you 3 examples of overreach really quickly. One, of course, I've just mentioned the vaccine mandate. The Department of Defense is ignoring the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993, which Congress passed to ensure that our free exercise of religion rights in the First Amendment were fully enforced and that the court had to impose the highest standard. The Air Force is actually telling, and so are the other branches, is actually telling the airmen, no, we decide what your rights are, and we have decided that we have a compelling public interest, and we have chosen the best means of doing so. That's the court's decision, but the Air Force is, under Biden's direction, they wouldn't be doing it but for Biden, is saying, no, we will tell you what the Constitution means and what the statute means. It's unbelievable. Immigration is another one. This is where you have the president ordering federal law enforcement officers to break the law. Here, Biden is ordering officers to violate the law that says certain aliens must be removed from the country and must be detained while they are in the country. He's completely ignoring the law. Third example, this is a potential one. If the Democrats' election bill is passed, it is an overreach that violates Article 1, Sections 3 and 4 of the Constitution. I will fight, and I will be the first one knocking on the courthouse door if that is passed. I know where the overreach is, and I know how to beat it.
Kelly, 90 seconds.
Because I have won tough elections, I am the only person on this stage who has been fighting against government overreach and winning. And what does that mean? We saw government overreach when the governor was closing churches while keeping abortion clinics open. We saw the governor closing businesses while keeping others open and some closed. Government should not be deciding which job is essential and which isn't. That's up to you. Every job is essential. And particularly when we saw the court with the overreach on the decision on HODIs, which led to value them both. And you know what? I have stood against government overreach. I was on the special committee that looked at government mandates and COVID-19 response overreach. And I was in special session in November 2021 protecting your First Amendment rights. If you didn't want to take a COVID-19 vaccine because your employer was mandating it, you didn't have to. I helped get that passed because I win tough elections. We cannot fight for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as conservative Republicans if we don't win elections. So I've been standing up for our gun rights as well. I introduced legislation in the legislature that would keep government from contracting with industry that doesn't support the Second Amendment. And I have also stood in my private practice and standing against private property right overreach by government, and I will continue to do that. I have stood with the Attorney General and outlawed sanctuary cities right here in Kansas. So thank you.
And apologies to Kelly that you had those Amber Alerts going off during your speech. I know
That's
it's an
all right.
important alert, but it was probably great poise. You kept going, so thank you for that. I want to let everybody know that that was not planned.
Thank you.
So, all right, the next question is also rather a general question. We'll get into some more specifics a little later, but this one we'll start with. We'll do Chris, and then it will go to Kelly, and then to Tony to do the final response. And so we're starting with Chris. Are you an America First candidate? What actions would you take to demonstrate your position as an AG?
Well, absolutely, I'm an America First candidate, and I'll remind Kansas Republicans that back in 2016, when a lot of people thought that President Trump was someone who might not be able to win and might not be conservative, I was the only elected official, either statewide or in Congress, who backed President Trump, and I backed him very early at the end of February in 2020. And strangely, I was alone throughout the entire primary cycle. So I'm certainly an America First candidate. I then advised President Trump throughout the 2016 campaign on immigration laws and election law. And then when he became president, I served as sort of an informal advisor, meeting with him regularly in the Oval Office, as well as with Steve Bannon, his chief strategist, on immigration laws, on census issues, and on election laws. And then, of course, he tapped me in 2017 to lead his Presidential Commission on Election Integrity. So I think my America First bona fides are pretty well established. The second part of the question is, what will you do to step out and distinguish yourself? I think you'll see Kansas be recognized as the other state not to be messed with, along with Texas. You know, the old license plates don't mess with Texas. Well, Texas has that reputation in the legal world. The Department of Justice knows that Texas is going to be the first state bringing a lawsuit. They're also going to know, after I'm elected, that Texas and Kansas are coming after them, and that they're going to have to fight in court every time Biden violates the law, which he will continue to do because his advisors are pushing to do it, and every time he violates the Constitution. So we will have a reputation as a state like Texas not to be messed with.
Okay, Kelly?
I always put America first, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, whether it's in my private legal practice or as an elected official. And you know what? We need the conservative Republican who can win this race, to continue to fight for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Because if we have a Democrat win, that won't happen. And you know what? We're still paying a high price as conservative Republicans for having lost the governor's race in 2018. In fact, we just had the governor veto a bill that would have banned government entities from instituting mask mandates, that would have banned government entities from instituting vaccine passports for you to live your life. So you can bet I am fighting for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that's what I will continue to do as our Attorney General. I am the person on this stage who put life on your ballot. On August 2nd, vote yes for value them both. I have voted yes in the legislature. I am the person on this stage who did that and defeated 2 liberal incumbents who would have been no's. I am the person on this stage who is keeping our sheriffs an elected position and fighting for liberty. And I am the person on this stage who has been fighting for pursuit of happiness and stopping the bureaucrats in the administrative state from their overreach with another constitutional amendment on your ballot to stop the bureaucracy. Those all came through Senate Judiciary Committee. And you know how I got those results? Because I win tough elections. I don't lose to the left. I don't lose to the Democrat. And we need the Republican who's a conservative who can win in November.
And Tony, same question.
I think that I have proven my bona fides as an American First, not just candidate, but an America First American. I volunteered in 2007 as a civilian to go to Baghdad and prosecute the war crimes trials. I helped the Iraqis try and convict Chemical Ali, Saddam's cousin, for war crimes and atrocities, and he was ultimately executed. I volunteered to go to Guantanamo. In 2008, I volunteered to go work on the detainee cases, and I ended up as the lead prosecutor on the attack against the USS Cole. I spent 5 years appearing in front of a military commission at Guantanamo Bay, prosecuting the guy that Osama bin Laden sent to Yemen to kill 17 American sailors and seriously injure 36 others. We need strong borders. We have to protect ourselves from the people coming into our country trying to harm us and trying to steal from us, whether it's adverse foreign actors coming here to steal our intellectual property or drug dealers bringing fentanyl into our country to kill our kids. We have to have strong borders. What will I do? I am the Attorney General who is best qualified for this job by experience and by temperament. Kansas will have the reputation of not being a state to mess with, but it's because we have an attorney in the office who is qualified for the job.
Okay, thank you. The order of the next question will be Kelly, then Tony, and then Chris. And this one is about managing the office. There are 12 divisions within the Attorney General's office. Do you have the managerial and budgeting experience to do the administrative duties required of the office? And we'll start with Kelly.
Yes, I do. As Senate Committee Chairman, Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman, I have to run an entire legislative committee. I have to look at the budget for our state. Where are we going to allocate and appropriate our money? I have voted on those issues. I have had to look across the board at all of our departments in Kansas, including the Office of Attorney General, and what their budget looks like, and what our law enforcement budget looks like, what our school budget looks like. You need the Attorney General to have that broad type of policy experience to run the office, to manage the office. And as Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman, I have to decide which policy we want to advance for our citizens in Kansas, in which we don't. And I have that experience. And the leader, the Attorney General running the office, you have to lead and have good people around you. I have done that my entire legal career, and I have done that as an elected official as well, because that matters. And I can assure you I will always put issue as Attorney General before ego. Not about getting headlines, not about getting TV coverage, but about winning on the issue. That's what I have experience doing. That's how I will lead the office. The issue needs to win. The case, we need to win that case. And I have the experience to do that, and will always make sure that we are well positioned in the Attorney General's office, and me as Attorney General, to do that.
Thank you. Tony?
Yeah, absolutely. Since I retired from the Department of Justice in November of 2020, I've been working as the Vice President and in-house counsel for a healthcare company. We are a $178 million a year corporation with approximately 2,000 employees, and I'm a corporate vice president. In addition to that, I own 2 businesses of my own. So I know how to make decisions based on a business person's bottom line, and I know how things like tax increases affect those of us who own businesses. Finally, as a prosecutor, I managed the entire USS Cole prosecution team. We had approximately 35 team members, 7 lawyers, 2 FBI agents, 2 NCIS agents, a staff of paralegals and investigators that I managed. Right now, the Kansas Attorney General's office is down 18 positions. When I talk about law enforcement and prosecution being under-resourced in this state and under siege, the Attorney General's office is an excellent example. 18 positions down, 8 attorneys, and 10 support staff. The way that I will address that is I will lead by example. If an officer is killed in a rural county in Kansas and that county attorney asks for help, I will be the person in the courtroom prosecuting that cop killer. When a Kansas case goes to the United States Supreme Court, I will be the person standing at the podium making that argument. I will lead the Attorney General's office by example, and I will motivate people in the office to stay and new attorneys to come.
And Chris, same question.
Not through any fault of my opponents, but just through the opportunities we've had. I have had the opportunity to lead a statewide office of similar size to the Attorney General's office. So you just need to look at what I did as Secretary of State. Now, the Secretary of State's office, when I came in, had some fat on it, and it needed to be trimmed. And I reduced the budget of the office by 18% over the 4 years that I was there. We cut it every single year. We never let it go back up. And most of that happened in the first 4 years I was there. At the same time, we increased services. We increased the number of things that we were doing. So I showed that you can reduce government, which is a fundamental principle to us who are conservatives. But as Attorney General, I don't anticipate that I'll be making cuts. As Tony mentioned, there are shortages. There are staff positions that need to be filled. And indeed, I think not only will I be filling those positions, I will also be adding a new litigation division. What Texas has, and I believe it's the only Attorney General's office in the country that has, is a special litigation division that takes on these suits when they take on the Biden administration. We will build a similar division in Kansas of attorneys who have civil litigation experience like I have, who got the experience fighting in federal courts all over the country against the ACLU and similar aligned organizations, and have fought the Department of Justice. And so I will not only create that division, I will personally recruit some of the attorneys I've worked with around the country to Kansas, and I know they will happily come because they want to be part of what Kansas is going to do. And I will personally lead it. I will be the one arguing in court. I will be the one in front of that appellate court like I have been in so many other cases.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, the next question will go first to Tony, then to Chris, then to Kelly. We're going to talk about immigration. What are the interests of Kansas around immigration policy and the border issues, and what would be the appropriate response of the Attorney General to handling those issues? And we'll start then with Tony.
Yeah, immigration impacts us on a daily basis in a myriad of different ways. While our agriculture sector needs workers to fill jobs, we need strong borders. I mentioned a few moments ago, there are people coming across our border with the intent to harm us. There are people coming across our border with the intent to steal from us. And there are people coming across the border with the intent to poison the children in our communities. That's why we have to have strong borders. This administration is not supporting those borders, and we need to force them to do it, even if we have to litigate it in order to make that happen. As your Attorney General, I will be leading the effort with regard to enforcing borders and at the same time pushing back on sanctuary cities. We had a city in Kansas recently that tried very hard, passed an ordinance to become a sanctuary city, and the problem with that ordinance was that there was an aspect of it that told local law enforcement, you cannot cooperate with the federal authorities. Even if you have somebody that you know is here illegally, and even if you believe they committed a crime, Kansas City Unified Government told their employees, you may not cooperate with ICE. Now is a crucial time in our country when it comes to the crime wave. We need to be giving Kansas law enforcement officers more tools and not less. And that's one of the reasons it's so important to push back against efforts like sanctuary cities.
And Chris.
Well, I think many of you know my experience on the immigration issue. Not only did I advise President Trump on this issue, I've been litigating this issue for the past 20 years. I was also a professor not only of constitutional law, but of immigration law. And so I know immigration law forward and backward. I will use every tool at my disposal, and I will not hesitate. There are a lot of Republicans who say, oh yeah, strong borders, we want strong borders. But when it comes to prosecuting crimes of recruiting illegal aliens to take jobs that Americans would otherwise occupy, suddenly they go deafeningly silent. I will not go silent. I will use those tools. I will use Kansas criminal law to prosecute illegal aliens who violate our criminal laws, which is what Governor Abbott and Attorney General Ken Paxton are doing in Texas. I will also go after the Biden administration. I'm already suing him on immigration issues on behalf of Texas sheriffs. I anticipate multiple areas. It's looking like they're going to be violating our asylum laws by basically allowing officials at the border to grant asylum right there, which violates federal law in a million ways I don't have time to tell you about now. I think that with the abolition of Title 42, there will also be additional violations of federal law coming, and we can only imagine other areas where the Biden administration hasn't even read federal immigration law. It's a book this thick. I know the law, and I know when they're breaking it. So Kansas will be leading the charge of states trying to stop Biden from violating federal statutes. As far as sanctuary cities go, yeah, the Kansas legislature did pass a sanctuary city bill, but it was a toothless bill. I proposed one years ago that would have taken away all state money from any city, any county that has a sanctuary policy. That's not in Kansas law. I'll fight for that if I'm Attorney General.
And Kelly.
With the Biden administration making our southern border open, we have all become border states, and we have to stand strong and fight against that. So because I win tough elections, I am the only person on this stage who has done something, gotten something done in Kansas to stop sanctuary cities. I worked hand in hand with our current Attorney General to bring legislation to the legislature. He testified, and I testified in favor of it as well, and we got that passed. We got that done so that no local government in Kansas could declare that law enforcement shall not cooperate with federal immigration law. I got that done because as a conservative Republican, I win tough elections. And you know what else? As Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman, I have given law enforcement more tools to prosecute those kinds of cases, to expand their jurisdiction if called into other jurisdiction in other counties, that they can go help as well. So that's why we need conservative Republicans to win. It's not good enough to be a conservative Republican, but you don't win. And it's not enough to tell us you're a conservative Republican, but how do we know? You've been untested. I am the conservative Republican on this stage who has been tested in the court of public opinion, who wins tough elections, who then represents you and conservative policies in the legislature, who gets things done. That's what the Attorney General needs to do, get things done. Remember, our Attorney General was a senator before he was the Attorney General, and that experience has served him well.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. The next question will be answered first by Chris, then by Kelly, then by Tony. We're going to switch to the Second Amendment, and it's a two-part question. How can Kansans be protected from federal efforts to limit the Second Amendment? And what needs to be changed or added to existing state laws?
Well, I'm happy to say that Kansas recently passed additional changes that I personally drafted. Kansas passed not only the amendments to our concealed carry law that allow 18-year-olds like my daughter who's going to college as a freshman and who's 18 and will be concealed carrying, but also we passed probably the strongest law in the country restoring gun rights for people who have committed a small crime in their background and have been barred for life from ever carrying a firearm again to defend their family. I drafted that, and I'm also the only person on stage who's actually litigated a Second Amendment case representing the gun owner, and I have defeated the current Attorney General's office in state district court on that very issue. So I've litigated, and in addition to, I've also taught the Second Amendment as a constitutional law professor, and I'm also a partner in a gun corporation, a rifle corporation based here in Kansas. So what threats do we face? I think the Biden administration is going to use the ATF to continue to bend federal law, indeed bend it so far that it breaks. We've seen it already with ghost guns. Sounds scary, doesn't it? But those are just homemade guns. Homemade guns are part of this country's culture. It was homemade guns that made a large percentage of the guns used by the American fighters in the Revolutionary War. There is no rash of crimes caused by ghost guns or homemade guns, but that is a violation not only of our Second Amendment rights, but also federal statute. They're trying to change the definition of a firearm. I anticipate we'll have another threat from the Biden administration trying to limit capacity of magazines as well. They may also try ammunition requirements for purchasing. In all of these areas, there are federal statutory problems. I will fight them in federal court, and I will stop them.
And Kelly?
As the person on this stage who wins tough elections, I have actually enacted law in Kansas to protect our Second Amendment rights, given those to young adults, 18, 19, and 20-year-olds, so they can conceal carry. Even had to override the governor's veto on that. Again, we wouldn't have to override the governor's veto had we not lost that election in 2018. And as far as state laws, I myself have introduced a law to protect you from government in this state from using your taxpayer dollars to contract with businesses who discriminate against firearms wholesalers, retailers, gun shops, to not have government use our own money to work against our Second Amendment rights. And you know what? We couldn't advance that all the way through the legislature this session. It's because the governor would veto it. So we have to be electing and nominating the conservative Republican who has a track record that you can look at, that fights and wins on these issues, who walks the walk and gets it done. I decided to run because I was concerned about these types of policies and the very woke Republican who represented me. And these policies don't get advanced unless we win. And with the left coming for our guns, wanting to register them, wanting us not to be able to buy them, wanting us not to be able to make them, we have to stand vigilant against the federal government and state government wherever there is overreach. And you can look at my record of having done that. Thank you.
And Tony, same question.
So just a moment ago, one of my opponents asked, how do we know if you're a conservative if you haven't been tested? My response to that is, the only way to be tested isn't to have a political voting record. A way to be tested is how you've lived your life. The Second Amendment is a very important and very dear and very personal issue to me. I'm a lifelong hunter. I have chased down bad guys for 30 years, and as a result, I carry a firearm every single day for personal protection. I'm a lifetime member of the NRA. We do not need more gun laws in this country. And Chris had a really good example of that. The ghost gun law, it's meaningless, all right? It doesn't add anything to protect our safety. It is a bunch of feel-good democratic policies that we don't need. As your Attorney General, I will push back against that.
Chris, since you were mentioned by name, you can have a 45-second rebuttal if you'd like.
Yeah, I'll actually use that 45 seconds to talk about what I continually hear from one of my opponents about electability. You know, winning a tiny little Johnson County Senate district or House district, that's not like running a statewide election. I'm the only candidate on the stage who's been in multiple statewide elections, and I've won 2 out of 3 statewide elections, and the 2 that I won by either the top winning majority of any other statewide official or the second highest majority of any other official. And the one loss was in 2018 which was a blue wave. Every close governor's race except one in the country went to the Democrat. So experience does count. And let me tell you, running statewide, there are a lot of things you learn on the trail. I have learned them, and I know how to win statewide, and we will win statewide, as the poll, which we just did last week, shows us winning by the same margin that Derek wins the governor's race. It's going to be a good year.
Kelly, I'll offer you the same 45 seconds.
Thank you. There is one person on this stage who has lost a statewide election to the left. It's not me. And I tell you what, I have never misjudged the left and how they will continue to come after us. I have won every single time I have fought against the left. In 2018, when Biden won where I lived, where Sharice Davids won where I lived, I outperformed even the other candidate on this stage. Conservative Republicans need to win. We cannot afford, again, what happened in 2018 by nominating the wrong Republican. It's important that you look at the voting record. It matters. I'm the only one on this stage who has a policy record that you can look at, and to rest assured that I will stand and fight for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Okay, let's switch. The next question in the order will be Kelly, then Tony, then Chris, and the topic will be private property rights. Discuss private property rights. Where are the current threats, and how can the Attorney General protect Kansans in this area, particularly rural Kansas?
If government can take your private property rights, they can come take anything. So I have devoted my legal career, my private legal career, to protecting private property rights in Kansas. I have won a case in the Kansas Supreme Court protecting your constitutional right that wasn't yet recognized in Kansas but was in the Constitution. We got that done. What we see coming out of the Biden administration, the 30 by 30 policy, that's all about by the year 2030, Biden wants to convert 30% of private lands to public lands. We cannot let that allow that to happen. We also hear about waters of the U.S., which impacts our ag community, that the federal government wants to expand the jurisdiction of the federal government over navigable water, including that puddle in my backyard that happens every time it rains, even though it's ephemeral water because it evaporates. The federal government wants to come and have jurisdiction over that. That's where our private property rights are headed with the radical left in the Biden administration. I have a career of standing up for that. I have fought for that in the legislature as well. I worked with the Kansas Livestock Association and Kansas Farm Bureau and protected open fields in Kansas from unlawful government surveillance. I got that done because I have been an elected official fighting for you and for your rights, already doing that. And I will take that same experience, that same policy, and take that to the Attorney General's office and always stand up and fight for private property rights.
Tony?
I agree that the level of overreach by this administration is absolutely unprecedented in the history of our country. Property rights are very important whether we're talking about 30 by 30 or we're talking about the government improperly classifying a species as endangered and prohibiting farmers and energy companies from operating their land. All of those are very important. I am very surprised to hear Senator Warren talk about a career she spent standing up for property rights, and the reason is this. At the beginning of this election, I looked at a database called Lexis, and it's a database that attorneys use to do research on cases, on issues, on topics, but you can use it to do research on attorneys. And so one of the things I did was I did a Lexis search on all three of us, okay? Secretary Kobach had 187 citations to his name, meaning 187 opinions that were written by judges that referred to him. I had 459, everything from bank robberies to kidnappings to carjackings to terrorists, jury trials, constitutional arguments, state courts, federal courts, military courts, and courts of appeal. Senator Warren had 11. I couldn't find a single case where she took a case to a jury, and I couldn't find a single case where she was the person standing at the podium. That is glorified law clerk work, and it's not the kind of qualifications that you need to be the Attorney General of the state of Kansas and to manage all of the complex litigation that our next Attorney General will be managing.
Thank you, Tony. I'm going to go to Chris now to do his response, and then I will give Kelly, then Chris, a 45-second rebuttal.
So let me just So I'm doing my 45 seconds now, or I'm doing my 90 now? Okay. Yeah, private property rights. Being a real estate attorney does have something to do with private property, but being a constitutional attorney has to do with actually defending private property rights in court. Not only have I taught private property as a constitutional law professor, not only have I written articles about property rights, I have this experience defending these constitutional questions. Now, 30 by 30, I'm not just going to mention it and say, oh, it's a big threat, and then not tell you anything about it. I'm going to tell you something about it. 30 by 30 is the Biden administration's objective to get 30% of all of the land in the United States into conserved or conservation status by the year 2030. Right now, only 12% of our land is in that status, and it's mostly national parks, as you'd imagine. It's also CRP land, as many of you have. As a fellow person who lives on a farm, lots of people around me, we don't have any CRP land right now. But they haven't told us how they're going to do it. If they try to get there by increasing the CRP program, that's fine. As everybody who's a farmer here knows, the feds, you decide. The feds are going to pay you a certain amount per acre. Do you want to do that, or do you want to put it in crops? Let them go crazy. Increase the price paid and see if they can get it. But they won't get to 30%. And so what they're going to try to do is they're going to try to use coercive regulations to coerce you into the CRP program or to coerce you into doing other things with your land. And that is when the state attorney general needs to step in and know how to argue how it violates your Fifth Amendment rights and your 14th Amendment rights. I will be the one knocking on the courthouse door for you.
Okay, Kelly, your 45-second rebuttal.
The Attorney General, as the chief legal advocate for our state, needs to be a problem solver. That is what I have dedicated my legal career to. Not all disputes make it to the courtroom. You know why? Because you use your skills to resolve problems, sometimes short of that. That's what people want. They want resolution to their problems. They don't want to buy into expensive litigation. I have done litigation as well, all stages of litigation. I've stood in front of the courtroom, in front of the jury, and won cases as well. So we need that breadth of experience. I have litigated cases involving China sending contaminated medicine to U.S. patients. I have fought on the milk and cheese market manipulation in Kansas. And I have won cases. And as the chief legal advocate, we need that breadth of experience.
Okay, and Chris, 45 seconds.
No, I appreciate the mentioning of the Lexis figures and it's not surprising because only two people on the stage, only two of us, have experience in federal court, have even been the chief attorney on a case in a federal courtroom. And it's not surprising that a person who focuses on criminal law is going to have more cases because criminal cases tend to be a little faster than complex civil litigation, and they're not as likely to go into multiple levels of appeal. But I think, yeah, both of us have extensive experience in litigation. And I also have extensive litigation in not only Kansas state courts, but other states' state courts. I've argued in some of the most liberal states in the country, including California. And let me tell you, that's no walk in the park. And also in places like Nebraska, where they actually have a much more conservative judiciary than we do. And it's because they have a better way of selecting Supreme Court justices. And I hope to talk more about that later.
Okay, we're going to talk about another topic that's related to immigration, and this one will go to Tony, then to Chris, then to Kelly. And it is, the question is, what can be done to deal with the inflow of drugs, particularly fentanyl, causing so many deaths? Okay. And Tony, that's yours.
Thank you, Cheryl. So when I began my career with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Topeka, it was under a drug grant, and it was to prosecute drug cases. At the time, we had a horrible meth lab problem here in Kansas. Not that we don't still have a meth problem, we do, but back then it was coffee pot and Bunsen burner meth labs all across the state. Over time, that developed into a specialty where I was prosecuting complex drug organization cases. And we're talking about the very kind of issues that we're talking about now with fentanyl. We were talking about Mexican drug cartels. We were talking about Chinese organized crime. And the cases that I prosecuted were cases where we would catch individuals importing those drugs into Kansas, and then instead of just prosecuting the mules, we would go after the organization. And we did it very effectively. It was very rewarding work as a prosecutor because we took a lot of drugs and a lot of bad people off the streets. The thing that's different about fentanyl is that it is killing far more people than any drug we've ever seen, right? We have fentanyl deaths happening on a daily basis here in Kansas. We need to change our thinking when it comes to fentanyl. Fentanyl is less a drug and more a weapon of mass destruction. I've prosecuted both of those kinds of cases. We need to arm the prosecutors in this state with the tools that they need in the courtroom to start treating fentanyl cases like weapon of mass destruction cases and not as drug cases. We've got to stop that drug from killing our kids.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, this is a great question. The use of the cartels and the human smuggling networks to smuggle drugs is something that's been a problem for a long time, but fentanyl has kind of raised the awareness of people of how bad this problem is. I represented not only Kansas, but I've worked with Sheriff Joe Arpaio, and I've represented Maricopa County in Arizona. I've also drafted statutes for Arizona. And let me tell you, and I've been out on the road with deputies of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, and when you make an arrest of someone who's smuggling illegal aliens, usually the minivan is riding very low on its axles. And it's not just because there are 12 to 15 people packed in that minivan, it's because under the floors and under the seats, you have all kinds of drug cargo being smuggled at the same time. The cartels move two types of cargo. So Arizona has been using a human smuggling law, making state prosecution of the smugglers, and in some cases of the aliens themselves, and of course the people smuggling the drugs. Kansas needs to do the same thing. We need a more aggressive human smuggling law. I will push for that as Attorney General and ask the legislature to do it. The second thing that we need to do is we need to use our identity theft statutes more aggressively. They have been used a little bit so far. One case went all the way to the Supreme Court recently, and Kansas won. But we can also prosecute illegal aliens and illegal alien smuggling of drugs and humans using identity theft statutes as well. And finally, we need several new laws that will stop this. Among the many new laws is a law for E-Verify, so that all employers in Kansas are legal. And I'll bet if you press other Republicans on that issue, not all of them are on board with E-Verify. I will push for it.
Thank you. Kelly?
First of all, we need to close our southern border. We have people coming across the southern border without being stopped, and we have a problem there. So I say first, secure the border. Second of all, give our law enforcement more tools. I have done that in the legislature. Give our law enforcement more tools, our prosecutors more tools to stop those who bring those in, to stop those who are distributing those, to stop those who are selling them. And we do have identity theft statutes that I personally have voted for in the legislature that would, again, give our law enforcement more tools to prosecute those who wish to bring that in here. And you know why I did that? Again, it's because I win tough elections. Nobody's policy on this stage is going to be enacted if they don't win tough elections. And we need to make sure that we have the Republican nominee who will do that, who will then go into office like I have done and secured our identity theft statutes, made them more usable by law enforcement and prosecutors, and to stop our sanctuary cities, stop our counties and our cities from creating sanctuary cities. I have done that as well. So these are tools we can use and we will continue to use, and we must strengthen them and stand strong with law enforcement. Thank you.
Okay, the next question will be answered first by Chris, then by Kelly, then by Tony, and we're going to talk a little bit more about government overreach. Already there's talk of another pandemic here just in time for elections. What are the limits to state power in pandemic control? Are you willing to challenge the governor, the legislators, the federal government if they exceed the limits you determine are set by state law or constitution? And that goes to Chris first.
Well, as you know, as I already mentioned, I've brought two federal lawsuits, one in the United States Supreme Court against the OSHA mandate, and the other one that's pending now, defending the members of the Air Force. So there are multiple limits. One is the First Amendment limit, and that's what we are asserting on behalf of the members of the Air Force. There's also the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which works in tandem with the First Amendment. Additional limits, which have not been tested as much in court, but I will test if the Biden administration or if somehow we end up with a Democrat governor again, I will test it against our governor, and that is there are Fifth Amendment and 14th Amendment liberty interests that can be used. There's over a century of Supreme Court case law on this. There is a right to bodily integrity, and there is a right to not be forced to take drugs against your will. And I think the forced COVID vaccinations violate both of those constitutional rights. So you have that constitutional right as well. In addition, if the federal government is doing it, there is also a violation of the 10th Amendment, which runs in parallel with them. They're exceeding the commerce power. That's what OSHA did. They had no authority to force Americans who are not doing something, as in deciding not to take the vaccine, to do something. It goes all the way back to the Obamacare case of 2012. The feds have no authority under the commerce power to force us to do something we don't want to do and claim that they're regulating commerce. No, they're not. They're abusing their authority. So those are the primary limits, to answer the question directly. Those are the three constitutional barriers that we have. And I know the Constitution, and I will use the Constitution because it is our best defense against this tyranny.
Kelly.
Thank you. The best defense is be elected, win tough elections, and represent our conservative values. I have done that. I was part of the special session in the legislature in November 2021 that got the religious exemption for you when your employer, because of the federal government, wanted to mandate that you take a COVID-19 vaccine if you didn't want to take it. I got that done for Kansas and signed into law. Remember SB 40? SB 40 allowed you as Kansans, if you were aggrieved by a government decision on social distancing or mandates of masks or COVID-19 shots. I wrote that. I got that through Senate Judiciary Committee. And with colleagues in the Senate and the House, we got that made into law to protect you from government overreach, from keep the governor from closing churches while keeping abortion clinics open, to keep businesses open, to keep schools open. We were the first state in the nation to close school buildings. And that's because we have a Democrat governor. And we have a Democrat governor for one reason, because we as Republicans lost the 2018 election for governor to a Democrat. We cannot afford that again. And in fact, you know what? Just Friday, the governor vetoed a bill that would have prevented government entities, including schools and any unit of government, from requiring a mask or a shot in response to any contagious or infectious disease. And we don't have that law because of this governor.
Tony?
I think it's very important for us to talk about overreach and the limits on state power. We've talked about the fact that the AG is both the first line and the last line of defense, and that it's important that we use the Constitution to push back as our means of defense against federal overreach. But let's talk about what the AG does. The AG doesn't make law. The AG's office doesn't make policy, okay? If you look at the AGs over the history of my lifetime, okay, when I graduated from law school, our AG was Bob Steffen. Okay, if you go back that far and you look at every AG that we've had since then, there is a common theme, all right? The AG was a prosecutor, the AG was a judge, or the AG worked in the office. All of them save one. The only one that didn't have one of those qualifications or a combination of those qualifications was Phil Klein. And we know how well that turned out for us as Republicans. A scandal-plagued administration that ended up with him losing the job to a Democrat after his first term. Those are the qualifications of the AG. The candidate who's running as a politician based on political experience is asking you to repeat the mistake that we as voters made with Phil Klein on the promise that it's going to go better. It's not. We need to elect a candidate who is qualified for the job, not a politician.
I think we have time for one last question before we do closing statements. The order of this question will be Kelly, then Tony, then Chris. Would you tell us in your own words exactly what your experience is that you think makes you qualified for this job and how you would use that to prioritize the time you spent in the office?
I have looked at Attorney General Derek Schmidt's record for 12 years as our Attorney General. He is a policy leader. He stands up for tax policy when Congress wanted to dictate here in Kansas how we would spend COVID-19 money that would be sent here to Kansas. He has stood up against the Biden administration on closing the Keystone XL pipeline, and we have seen the results of what happened when Biden did that. He has encouraged and met with and worked against TikTok and GoFundMe to give parents rights and applications to protect their children and to not be scammed by GoFundMe in the Consumer Protection Act area. So it is a policy-driven position. It may be, 20, 30 years ago it was more prosecutor, but you know what? The office has expert prosecutors in it. The Attorney General does not go to court and litigate every case. If you are, you're ignoring the other 11 divisions of the office. The Attorney General directs and runs policy. Go look at the Attorney General's website when you go home. He leads on those policy, whether it's energy, taxes, immigration, education. He leads on those policies, and that's the type of Attorney General I will be as well, because the office is too important to let it fall to a Democrat. We have to know where you stand on policy, and I am the person on this stage who you can bet I'm standing up for the Parents' Bill of Rights. I'm standing up for fairness in women's sports. That's the type of policy I will help lead on as well.
Tony?
Thank you. I mentioned a moment ago that the Kansas Attorney General is the chief law enforcement official of the state, not the chief legal advocate, as someone has sort of deceptively described it. It's the chief law enforcement official of the state. Saying that the only division of the office that has to do with prosecution is the criminal division reflects a basic misunderstanding of what that office does. Okay? Whether it's the Consumer Protection Division, Medicare fraud and abuse, crime victims compensation, or the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, every single division of that office touches in one way or another on investigation and prosecution. And minimizing the importance of being a prosecutor or having been a judge or having worked in the office reflects a misunderstanding or a misapprehension of what that office does. My qualifications for the job is that I have been dealing with these issues for 30 years. My qualification for the job is that when I come on the job, I will be making decisions about the allocation of law enforcement resources, the allocation of legal resources, the allocation of prosecutorial resources based on a career as a prosecutor and not on my personal political agenda and not on trying to get elected to the next office. I am not somebody who didn't finish my first term as a representative before I ran for Senate and then didn't finish my first term in the Senate before I ran for AG, and who knows what office that person will be running for should they get elected Attorney General. We need an Attorney General who's focused on doing the job of Attorney General.
Chris?
The question was about qualifications, and we've already talked a lot about qualifications, and I've mentioned, of course, the many lawsuits I've brought against Democrat presidents and then the many suits I've defended against the ACLU. But I haven't mentioned that I took a 2-year hiatus when I was a law professor, and I worked at the Department of Justice, and I was John Ashcroft, Attorney General John Ashcroft, U.S. Attorney General, his chief advisor on immigration law. And I also prosecuted, or rather argued the appeal of some cases that were in the Ninth Circuit, and believe it or not, actually won those cases. They were immigration enforcement cases. But you can look at who's endorsed me. All of us have endorsements from various people, but I think 2 are particularly important. I've been endorsed by Attorney General John Ashcroft and by Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is important because not only is he someone who has real conservative bona fides, but Ted Cruz was the Solicitor General of the Texas Attorney General's office. In other words, the top arguing attorney in that office, and he's decided that I'm best for this job. Look, the #1 threat to our freedom right now is Joe Biden and the people who pull his puppet strings. So therefore, my #1 allocation of my time will be leading that special litigation division myself and bringing some of the best attorneys in the country to Kansas to do that. My second allocation of time will be defending against ACLU suits that are brought to challenge Kansas laws. As soon as we value them both, and start passing strong pro-life legislation, the ACLU is going to come after us. I have experience all over the country defending against the ACLU, and in fact, they even have ads raising money off of me saying, help us raise money to fight Chris Kobach in court. I present a threat to them, and I will continue to present a threat to them.
Okay, now we're going to do 2-minute closing statements, and based on the order that was drawn in the beginning, the first closing statement will be by Chris, second by Kelly, and the final by Tony.
So we've talked already about qualifications. We've talked already about how I have won 2 out of 3 statewide elections, and I'm the only person up here who has ever been in a statewide election and has that valuable experience. This is going to be, and I'll tell you that probably anyone on the stage can win in the general election. It is going to be a red wave, and the polling does indicate that. But I want to talk a little bit more about another part, a question that I thought we were going to get, but I really want to talk about, and that is there's another really big threat out there. It's a threat to our elections. Have any of you seen 2,000 Mules? If you haven't, watch it. It's extraordinarily compelling. And I drafted the law when I was Secretary of State that empowers both the Secretary of State and the Attorney General to prosecute election fraud. And I have an undefeated record prosecuting election fraud from 2015 to when I left office in 2018. So I will be prosecuting election fraud in Kansas. And if there is any ballot harvesting that we see within the boundaries of Kansas, you can rest assured we will prosecute it from the Kansas Attorney General's office and any other election fraud that we find. I was the only Secretary of State with that power in America. Kansas remains the only state where the Secretary of State has that power. But I made just as a measure of insurance, I said it shouldn't just be the Secretary of State, because you might have a Secretary of State who doesn't want to do it. You need to give it to the Attorney General too. I will be there. I want to prosecute election fraud because you have to deter election fraud to show the fraudsters that you are serious and you will get caught in the state of Kansas. So that's another threat to our system that is not just Joe Biden. That's coming from the Democrats. That's coming from the grassroots of states like Michigan and Pennsylvania and places where election fraud runs deep. But they want to bring it to Kansas. Indeed, they have brought it to Kansas, as evidenced by the cases of election fraud that I successfully prosecuted. If you want an Attorney General who just sees this as another 4 years of normal business, steady hand on the tiller, then I suggest you vote for one of my opponents. But if you want someone who sees what the threat is and knows how to address the threat, then I'm your man.
And Kelly.
I think it's not very careful thinking to think that any Republican can automatically win in the general election. We have a candidate in this race who has already lost a statewide election to the left. That was in 2018. We cannot afford that loss again in 2022 because the left is coming for all our rights, for our way of life, for our property, for our children in our schools and their education. So if you'll recall, our Attorney General, Derek Schmidt, he was a senator when he ran for Attorney General, and he has used that experience well in office to defend and fight for policies that we care about. There is one person on this stage who has lost a case to the ACLU and cost you, the Kansas taxpayers, $1.9 million of attorney's fees we're going to have to pay to the ACLU because when he was Secretary of State, he lost that case. He was also ordered by the judge to have continuing legal education, sort of remedial education, because he couldn't introduce a document into evidence he didn't know how. So we need the conservative Republican in this race who has experience fighting and winning. That's what matters, because our conservative policies, our conservative values, what we care about as Americans will not be represented in the Attorney General's office unless we have a conservative Republican with the track record you can look at and depend on and trust to win this tough election. It's too important to risk with a candidate who says they're conservative, but we don't know. How can we know? Been untested in the court of public opinion. I have been tested and I win. And that's what matters. We have to win in November. And the other candidate, conservative Republican, but doesn't win. And this election is far too important to get it wrong like we did in 2018. We have to get it right. Too much is at stake. We have seen how far, how fast, how far left the Biden administration has gone, and it won't stop. I'm Kelly Warren, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Tony.
I promised you at the beginning of the evening that you would see a pretty sharp contrast between a career prosecutor and two career politicians. And I submit to you that you've seen that contrast very clearly this evening. Let's talk first about the importance of the job. We have reached a time in our country where there are efforts to defund the police. There is a profound disrespect for the rule of law. There are efforts to create sanctuary cities right here in Kansas. And as a country, we have somehow gotten to the place where in order to be considered socially enlightened, you have to be soft on crime. And so we see our society doing things like shortening sentences, letting people out of prison early, eliminating mandatory minimum sentences, reforming bail so that people are out on release while awaiting trial on violent crimes. And then somehow, as a society, we're surprised that the violent crime rate is up and the murder rate has skyrocketed. That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, and it should serve as an illustration of why, especially now, it is so important that our chief law enforcement official actually be a law enforcement official. Now let's talk about the race. 4 years ago, we took the governor's race for granted. As a result, we have a governor now who governs inconsistently with our values as Kansans. The Democrats have handpicked a candidate for Attorney General who I believe is running very much like our Democratic governor ran 4 years ago. He's running as an outsider and as a prosecutor and not a politician. In other words, he's running just like me. But when you look at his resume, he played minor league ball, and I've been in the majors for 25 years. We do need to think about the race. We need to think about which candidate on this stage does the best job of beating the Democrats at their own game in November. Kansas does not need another career politician, and we certainly don't need another career politician in the AG's office. We need an AG who will fight crime, who will win litigation, who will win in December, and who will keep us safe.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we can give the candidates a hand.
All right.
All right, thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you all.